New reporting based on a draft report from the Inspector General and the DOJ indicates that Jeff Sessions, when he was Attorney General, was the most vicious and pushed the hardest in trying to separate children from their families as they reached the border seeking asylum. Now, Donald Trump's zero tolerance policy sought to prosecute every single person who was seeking asylum. And in order to do that, they separated children away from their parents, put them in cages, and as many as 6 kids did die in detention under the Trump administration as a result. That's not even counting the more than 12 adults who died as a result of Donald Trump's actions. But really behind the scenes, you had then Attorney General Jeff Sessions essentially implementing this policy in the most extreme way and telling DOJ prosecutors that they needed to listen to what he and Trump wanted. So the 5 US attorneys along the border with Mexico, including 3 appointed by Trump, recoiled in May of 2018 against an order to prosecute all undocumented immigrants, even if it meant separating children from their parents. They told top Justice Department officials they were deeply concerned about the children's welfare. But it turns out that Jeff Sessions wasn't buying it and didn't have any empathy whatsoever for these children. Here's what he said in response. And again, this is according to a draft of a report done by the Inspector General for the Justice Department. Sessions said, "We need to take away children," Sessions told prosecutors, according to participants' notes. One added in shorthand, "If you care about kids, don't bring them in. Won't give amnesty to people with kids." So this was part of a terrible, cruel strategy meant to deter people from seeking asylum in the United States. I have more details, but John, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, just briefly, that last comment that you read, the little shorthand. I know it's a small thing in the grand scale of everything that happened, but like, if you're gonna institute these sorts of like incredibly cruel fascist policies, shouldn't you have to like use a full sentence? Like it's the casualness of it. It's like, I'm talking about something that couldn't be more real, that I'm going to tear apart moms from their just born children. And I don't even care enough to write out a full thing. Just a little like scribble out something. Yeah, that's fine, that'll do it. It really gets you into the mindset of the sort of people that could do this, that it really didn't bother them at all. They didn't seem to have put too much thought into it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if it did bother them, it didn't bother them enough to really stand up to what Jeff Sessions was demanding. Because Kirsten Nielsen was apparently the one who was most vocal in the beginning against this policy. And it literally took her less than a day to basically be on board with it. So I felt like the New York Times piece on this tried to basically make the readers feel some sympathy for Kirsten Nielsen, but no, 0% sympathy. She went ahead with what they wanted, and that's all that matters. It shows you exactly who she is. She's just as feckless and pathetic as anyone else within the Justice Department who went along with this. So Rod Rosenstein, who's also was the Deputy Attorney General at the time, also wanted to make it clear that they wanted to separate children from their parents at the border, regardless of what the children's age was. So in one quote, he said, "Per the Attorney General's policy, we should not be categorically declining immigration prosecutions of adults in family units because of the age of a child." And this came up after there were instances of infants who were still breastfeeding, being taken away from their mothers. And there were some people who spoke up about it, I guess, and Rosenstein's response was what I just read to you. So again, I mean, going back to what you were saying, John, no empathy whatsoever. These are so-called pro-life conservatives. They pretend to care so much about the lives of the unborn, but when it comes to actual humans and actual children, some of whom are as young as infants, I mean, when push comes to shove, you know what they actually think. They don't care. And again, this was part of a deterrence program, essentially telling the world, hey, if you're fleeing violence and persecution in your country and you're coming to us seeking asylum, well, that's too bad. We're gonna go ahead and persecute you further, take your children away from you. It's incredibly hideous.
Yeah, and that, like, as a philosophy, the idea that we're gonna make things so bad that you would prefer to stay somewhere where there's war or political persecution, domestic violence, and things like that. I mean, obviously, this is the most like iconic part of that, but it really does seem to have wormed its way through like all different aspects of the administration. Like things have become hell in 2020. And really fast, I just want to mention, because I'm glad that you're talking about this, because I know that it was like the biggest story of 2018, but a lot of people, unfortunately have moved on, aren't thinking about it a lot. There are still maybe this particular policy in the form and the extent that it was practiced initially may not still be in effect, but the way that migrants are being treated is still barbaric in a number of different ways. COVID, rampaging through these facilities. You have the uterus collector and things like that, news that people have already moved on from. But let's also just briefly mention that while I'm glad that more people who were apparently instrumental in putting into effect this policy, including people like Rod Rosenstein that I had never heard being affiliated with this, you do also have Stephen Miller, a guy who's in the news now for contracting COVID. He has stuck around in the Trump administration for so long, when so many people have transitioned away, even though he was like initially one of the like most front and center architects of this plan that was so damaging to Trump in the midterm elections. They apparently still value him so much that they've kept him. And most of the people in this story are now gone, but you do still have Stephen Miller.
Yep, yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, one of the aides closest to Stephen Miller later tried to throw Trump under the bus when called out for implementing these types of policies. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I also want to call out former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, because we should all remember what his messaging was, and then we should also keep in mind what the reality is. So let's go to this video.
These optics have not been good for the administration. What's the response to that?
Well, it hasn't been good. And the American people don't like the idea that we're separating families. We never really intended to do that. What we intended to do was to make sure that adults who bring children into the country are charged with the crime they've committed. We'll work our way through it and try to do it in the most compassionate way possible.
I mean, lies upon lies upon lies. The Attorney General's goal, according to Rod Rosenstein from this report, was to create a more effective deterrent. Don't make a mistake about it, more effective deterrent, so that everybody would believe that they had a risk of being prosecuted. Imagine like showing up to the border because you're terrified for your life, for your family's life, you're looking for safety, and you're immediately treated as a criminal. That was intentionally done to stop people from looking for safety in the United States. That's what it was all about. And by the way, Horowitz, Michael Horowitz, who's the Inspector General doing this report and investigation, had been preparing to release the report since late summer. According to a person familiar with the investigation, though, the process allowing for responses from current and former department officials whose conduct is under scrutiny is likely to delay its release until after the presidential election. So I'm glad that we got some reporting on the draft of this Inspector General report, and this is who we're dealing with in the Trump administration. They do not care about human lives, and I think the coronavirus pandemic has shown us that they don't care about the lives of immigrants, that's for sure, but they don't care about our lives. They don't care about lives, period. They just care about themselves.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.